Welcome back to the cabin. You're here with Carl Latham. I'm going to jump right in with the first lesson I would give anyone who has a budding interest in playing the drums. We're going to talk about note values, we're going to talk about notation, we're going to talk about measures, we're going to talk about basic technique of holding the sticks in match grip, and we're going to play a little bit some quarter notes. And we'll also add the bass drum even, and play some bass drum and hands. And if you don't have a bass drum, you can tap your foot and play your hands. So, to take a look at that, here's the first lesson. We're going to look at notation, staff, measure, note values, 4/4 time signature, match grip, full strokes, and you will apply those things to lesson 1 in the Alfred snare drum method using full strokes with alternating sticking. And we're going to work on syncopation, lesson 1, the bass drum, playing quarter notes and using alternating sticking in your hands. If we're going to talk about the basic terminology that you need to know about drumming, the first thing you need to know is what a measure is. A measure is a group of beats. Measures are indicated by the lines on the staff, the lines separating on the staff, the vertical lines. Between each of those two vertical lines is a measure of music. It's a group of beats. Could be 1 beat, could be 6 beats, could be 4 beats, could be 19 beats. It's a group of beats, okay? The next thing you need to know about is time signature. Time signature seems to be a tricky item for some drummers that I encounter. Everybody kind of seems to know what the top number is. The top number is the number of beats in a measure. That's pretty easy to figure out. If I put on a click track here, and I tell you we're in a measure with 2 in the top number, you would count like this. 1, 2, 1, 2. If there was a 3 in the top, it would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Typical of waltzes. 4 in the top would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which is what we know about in a lot of different styles of popular music and music everyone seems to know. So, what you need to know is that the top number tells you how many beats in a measure. What the bottom number tells you is what kind of note is going to represent that beat, is going to represent each count. And when we start talking about note values, there are whole notes, there are half notes, there are quarter notes, there are eighth notes, 16th note, 32nd notes. There's a pretty simple pattern there of dividing by 2. Just like if you order a pizza, you get a whole pizza. You divide it in half and you got 2 halves. Divide that in half, you got 4 quarters. I don't know. I love pizza. I'm in the Facebook group Jersey Pizza Joints or whatever it is. It's what my favorite Facebook group I've ever seen, because all people do is talk about pizza in there, and they get really opinionated. It's a nice way to put it. But if you think about it, most of the music you may encounter in the beginning has 4 beats in a measure. So that would be 4 in the top number. Well, if there was a 1 in the bottom, each one of those beats would be represented by a whole note, which is an open circle. If each of those beats was a half note, it would be described and notated with an open circle with a stem. If it was a quarter note, which is what I'm going to tell you we're going to work in most of the time at the beginning here, is 4/4 time. There will be 4 quarter notes worth of time in each measure. If it was represented by an eighth note, there would be an 8 in the bottom. 16th note, a 16 in the bottom. So if we go back to the quarter note, we go back to the metronome. My lovely wife just walked through the studio. She gave me the look that probably most of my students give me. So if we're here, I add this back. I'm going to tell you that each of those counts is represented by a quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to quarter notes in the measure, 4/4. This is 4/4 time. But if we start talking about the note values some more, those quarter notes can be broken in half into eighth notes. And I'm sure everyone in the room knows how to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and those would be your eighth notes already. A lot of rock beats have eighth notes in them. 16 notes, we're dividing in quarters again. We divide. Each quarter note is now divided into quarters. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and is 8 equal pieces, so we need to go in between those. 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4E and the 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4E and the. Now, I know that was kind of fast and a lot of information. You can forget about all of it if you want, because for today, we're just going to work on quarter notes. And I kind of left out a secret that you need to know right away. Each of those notes also has a corresponding rest value. So you can play for a whole note, or you can rest for a whole note. Play for a half note, rest for a half note, quarter, etc. There's another thing we need to talk about. If we were playing any other instrument in the universe, singing, bass, violin, anything, each one of these notes would be worth a full quarter note. If they were represented as a quarter, it would sound like this. Da, 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 da. A lot better than that, I hope. So if you had a whole note equals 4 quarter notes. Da. Or if we see a whole note represented on the snare drum, we would just go 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would count the rest. I know it's a little crazy, but it's just the nature of our instrument. A half note is worth 2 quarter notes. Da, 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 da. On drum, 1, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each quarter, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ace. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 16ths. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So hopefully that will start to enlighten you as to how note values relate to playing music. Now I'd like to talk about tempo. Because everybody talks about, oh my God, 30-second notes, they're fast. Well, 30-second notes at 70 are, which is not particularly fast for me. The speed of those notes is related to the tempo. Tempo is indicated by a metronome marking, MM. This right now I'm at 70. 70 equals 70 beats per minute. And in most software, when you're writing music in Logic or GarageBand or anything else, instead of having MM, it would be BPM equals 70 or 70 equals BPM, beats per minute. Okay? I think that's enough tech talk for the minute. Let's talk about holding the drumstick. What I would like to teach you is match grip. Both hands are the same. That's why it's called match grip. If you pick up a stick like you pick up anything else in life, you pick it up between your thumb and your first finger. That's called the fulcrum. The fulcrum is like a seesaw. You have to find a point. It's a pivot point on the stick. If you hold the stick too far toward the front, there's more weight in the back. Like if you have a bigger guy on the back side, on the one side of the seesaw, and a small guy on the other side, then the poor small guy is going to be in the air all day. Or vice versa. If you put the big guy on the other end, he's going to be on the ground on this side, and the small guy is going to be up in the air here. So what you need to do is find the place on each stick where it's balanced. And I play these wonderful, innovative percussion sticks, which are always very well balanced. And you find a point where the stick will want to, once you put it in motion, it'll want to stay in motion by itself because it's equally balanced in your fulcrum. It's a lot to think about. Just put it in the back of your head and file it away You'll get to that as we go, as we start to work on your technique. So you start by holding both sticks in fulcrum. Right now I'm holding my arms in German grip, match grip. My forearms are toward the ceiling. I'm not putting my fingers on the stick yet. I'm just holding in the fulcrum. If I pull my pinky toward the stick, all my other fingers follow. Hands out, pinky's in, then everything follows, okay? Now I'm in match grip. You form a V on the pad. If I lift both of my wrists back up to 90 degrees to the pad, now I'm ready to execute a full stroke. To learn to execute a full stroke, you're going to want to throw your wrist down at the stick down at the pad, leave your wrist down at first, and let the stick rebound up. You see how the stick came up in the air? Same with the other hand. If I do this, you see how the stick wants to come off of the drum. You need to learn to take advantage of that. So from here, I throw the stick down, come up. In the end, what you really want to do is you want to throw down and follow the stick back up to 90 degrees. Now, I live upstate New York, and I do not need to throw the stick down so hard that the stick is going to rebound in Manhattan or Brooklyn. I just need to get it back to 90 degrees. Playing on a practice pad right now, if I hit that on a snare drum, that's probably a double F or triple F already. Throw down, have it come back up. That's a full stroke. Now, if you consult the Alfred book, this book, you'll go to a page where it says, you are now ready to play. What we're going to start with there are quarters, halves, quarter, half, and a whole in the first line. So if I'm going to play 4 quarters followed by 2 halves, then 2 quarters, etc., it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you're going to wonder, when I hit that whole note or I hit those halves, why are those huge spaces? Why aren't they rests? Well, we treat them as rests when you're playing snare drum. Because for everybody else, those measures, those first 4 measures would go da, 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 because they can sustain the note. We're not sustaining the note. So you need to think about that right away, because that becomes a question for drummers when they start encountering other instrumentalists and singers. And why is our whole note written there? Why don't they just write a quarter note and have 3 rests? Because you need to know that that's a long note for everybody else in the ensemble. Okay? So what we're going to do, there's 4 measures where you're going to play with your right hand. There's 4 measures where you're going to play with your left hand. And then on the bottom of the page, you're going to combine. So what you can do is you can set your metronome. I'm setting mine to 70 beats per minute. I'm going to play it on drum now. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's followed by alternating sticking. If you play with your right, the next one's a left. If you play with your left, the next is a right. Now, if you notice, even I got a little off there a couple times. When I'm playing a slower tempos like this, I tend to count smaller pieces of the beat in between. We call them partials, subdivisions. So you might want to start counting right away out loud while you're playing along. It's good to start counting out loud when you first start to play because it's much more challenging after you played for a while to separate your mouth from your hands. So if I look at the bottom of the page where we're going to start with the left hand, I'm going to count eighth notes in between to try to help myself stay in time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 Okay, so that's the beginning of Alfred. Lesson 1 has a number of exercises where we also include rests. For instance, lesson 1, number 2, is quarter, 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 and a rest, which would be like this. Pretty simple idea. Play for a quarter note, don't play for a quarter note. Okay? The last thing I'd like to talk about here is if you go to Syncopation. That's this book, great book by Ted Reed. We're going to work on lesson 1. I'm going to pick the tempo up a little bit, just for sake of brevity here. I'm going to move it up to 100. What I want you to do is get used to playing right away with your bass drum. You can tap your foot if you want, because what we're going to do is we're going to work on coordination between our hand and our feet right away from the first lesson, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add the bass drum on quarter notes, and then we're going to play alternating sticking on the top. So I'll play the first 3 measures, and you'll see how it goes. Oh, there's a new topic in here, a half note rest, which will occur in number 3. You don't play for 2 notes, 2 quarter notes, okay? Let's give it a whirl. I'm going to start with the bass drum. I'm going to play the bass drum with my heel down, flat foot. Okay? So I'm going to throw the beat at the head for quarter notes. I think that should be plenty of information to get you started on your first lesson. Go have fun and try to get in a half-hour a day if you can. You can do an hour a day, that would be fabulous. And I look forward to seeing you next week. All right, have a great week.